if I just start sort of explaining a little bit about what I do, I am, I've been in the lobby for 12 years. So I've got a sort of breadth of experience from my time in political journalism. And I'm actually leaving the lobby this month to take up a new role with ITV News as head of UK news. So I feel like I've done my time, but also that I've got sort of some interesting things to say, but also how politics has changed in the time that I have been there. I mean, what's interesting for me is working in TV news, and especially for ITV News, we have a sort of quite a unique USP in how we try and treat political journalism. And that is basically that political journalism isn't just lobby journalism. It's actually about, you know, if you say ITV News to people, we like to do the human stories first and foremost in everything that we do. So that's about looking at communities and people's stories. So for some recent examples of that, we've done sort of Dan Hewitt's work in Croydon with housing, or Paul Brown's work on care homes. And that the reason I want to make that distinction is I think there's a real difference between what I've called lobby journalism and political journalism more broadly, because lobby journalism, I think by its nature, and politics by its nature, is somewhat adversarial. It's built into the system. And therefore the he said, she said is sort of, is to a certain extent, sometimes inescapable. But you also do have stories and ways of doing politics whereby you can bring different organizations and different parties together because you're highlighting an issue that clearly needs to change. And actually people understand that and will work together to create that change and create policy changes, because it isn't necessarily about beating somebody, it's about improving the greater good. And I think that we've had some real success with that. And that's an area that I'm keen to keep pursuing and what we do. But you know, there clearly are problems in the way that we address each other in political journalism, but also how we work with politicians. I mean, I sat down the other day with 3 pretty well-known female senior political journalists, all of whom have been doing it for a while. And I sort of mentioned I was doing this, and I sort of said, you know, what's your experience of it? And they all had experience, like very negative experiences, one of whom had been doxxed, which means that someone had posted their address, home address online. One of whom had had police involvement. And the common factor between it all, I said, why do we think this is on the increase? And they agreed it was on the increase in the last sort of few years, seemed to be because of the blurring of the line between public and private. And that is, you know, political journalists are expected to have a public profile. And sometimes a lot of that is arriving through social media. And I think creating a line and putting a line between the public and the private is really important, both for politicians, but also for political journalists as well. And I think, you know, ultimately there is a role for that to and fro to continue, because it is politics and it's adversarial, and it's important that we, you know, hear from the Prime Minister and the leader of the opposition, and that to its nature is going to have some friction between it. But if I look very quickly about what we could do, practically, I think demystifying TV political journalism for MPs and the public more broadly is important. You know, I will always try and get a woman on to appear if we feel we haven't got that diversity, or, you know, certain communities or certain voices. You know, you're always looking for that diversity of thought and diversity of story in order to make sure that you're not just creating that Westminster bubble and perpetuating it. And then I suppose it's sort of that line between what is private for people involved in politics and what is public, and just making sure that we respect and continue to work out what that is, because I think as social media continues to gain prominence, we just need to keep checking that and making sure that we are being compassionate in the way that we all talk to each other.